All right. So, welcome. I'm here with my good friend, Rich Schardan. Rich, how long have we known each other? It's been a long time, feels like.
Oh, gosh.
How long do you think?
Well, close to 20 years, I guess, it's gone by.
That's about right. We first met when you and your lovely wife invited me to speak before the Major Case Squad in St. Louis, if that's not right. That sounds right, doesn't it?
That's correct.
That's right. That was a long time ago. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is so that people get an idea?
Okay, yeah, I was a police officer in Granite City, Illinois. For 25 and a half years, I retired as a captain. From there, during that time, I was with the St. Louis Major Case Squad for, I believe it was 15 years. I was a report officer, and then I moved on to being a deputy commander for 12 years. So I handled some pretty high-profile cases in that situation. And I also did 5 years with the Metropolitan Enforcement Group of Southwestern Illinois, which was a covert drug enforcement group. And so I was doing the undercover work, covert work for over 5 years with them during those assignments. And then I spent time in investigations. I retired as the chief of investigations when I retired from Granite City. And then I taught school at the junior college locally for about a year. And then I got the job as police chief in Marysville, Illinois. And I took that position for 10 and a half years. And through that, I was one of the first in the International Association of Chief Police. I went ahead and was one of the first participants in the mentoring program.
What's a mentoring program? What do you mean by that?
For new police, yeah, that was for new police chiefs. And I went ahead and mentored a couple myself. They had to be 5 years as a police chief to be able to be a mentor. So when I got my 5th year in, I became a mentor for the association.
So you've been doing this a long time. All told, how long have you been in law enforcement?
About 911 stuff. I was actually the chairman for the 911 board here in Madison County, Illinois.
Really? I did not know that. Why have you been hiding that from me? I had no idea.
Yeah.
What did that involve?
So that's pretty well. So, pardon?
What did that involve? Working for the 911 board. What did that involve?
That was, well, I was on the board as a board member, and then I think it might have been 7 or 8 years, and then I spent the last couple of months actually as a chairman, and that was when we were looking at consolidation. By state law, we had to consolidate because we had 16 PSAPs, our answering points. We had to get that down to 8 or less. So we covered that over the last few months. And then after we got our plan put in with the state, that's when I went ahead and resigned from the board.
Okay. So it was very directive driven on your part, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Once you accomplished what you needed to accomplish, time to move on.
Correct.
We're going to talk just briefly today. I want to get your perspective as a lifelong law enforcement professional on the issue of the proper procedure to respond to 911 calls. Before we do that, I want to take a moment and watch a video, okay? Hold on with me, okay? So this is going to be a 911 call. The officer, this is the Wichita Police Department body camera video of an officer-involved shooting involving a swatting incident. We're going to watch this first. All right, you ready? Here it comes.
Walk this way! Walk!
Okay, tell me exactly what happened. They were arguing and I just shot him in the head and he's not breathing anymore.
Last night, a man called 911.
I'm just pointing the gun and making sure they stay in the closet, my mom and my little brother.
With an emergency that seemed very real.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, because I already poured gasoline all over the house. I might just set it on fire.
Okay, well, we don't need to do that, okay?
Police quickly responded.
There's complaints about he did shoot his dad in the head and he's not breathing. He's also indicating that his mom and brother are in the house and he has them at gunpoint.
And when they arrived,
a 28-year-old male opened the front screen door and stood in the doorway or just outside that doorway. Officers gave him several verbal commands to that male to put his hands up and walk towards them. The male complied for a very short time.
This is video police released Friday. Officers say the man, 28-year-old Andrew Finch, who police call an innocent victim, lowered his hands to his waist and quickly pulled them back up.
Fearing for those officers' safety, the officer on the north side fired one round, striking the male.
When police went inside, they found no hostages, no one dead, no one even hurt.
This prank phone call, we don't see it as a joke. It's not a prank. It only heightened the awareness of the officers, and we think led to this deadly encounter.
Now Finch's family wants justice.
I keep thinking this is a dream. I'm going to wake up and he's going to be here. But the cops can't just go around shooting people without any consequences. They cannot do that.
You still with me, Rich? Did you get a good view of that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So before we go further, I want to go through a couple of definitions real quick. So as people may or may not know, myself, Stan Crowder, and Aurelio Coronado published a textbook this year called False Allegations, and it's a book about fraudulent reports of crime. And one of the chapters written by myself and Dr. Crowder is false 911 calls. And in this particular chapter, we made sure to cover the issue of swatting. Now, a false 911 call is defined as let's see, go right here. We'll go to, they define it. There's different kinds of false 911 calls, but basically these are calls regarding events that aren't crimes or regarding events that didn't happen. And swatting is a variation on the false 911 call, where the details provided indicate the need for an imminent breach with armed law enforcement personnel to save lives that are in imminent danger, aka the Special Weapons and Tactics Team, commonly referred to as SWAT. This sends police into high gear, and sometimes they act without fully attending to protocol, resulting in premature breaches of property against innocent homeowners and potentially even loss of life. And that was the thing that we were most concerned about when we first wrote this chapter, because there have been a number of high-profile cases over the years involving incidents of swatting. This is when somebody calls into 911, they give a description of an event that would initiate a SWAT response, and then SWAT responds, and without doing their due diligence or following their protocols, someone winds up getting shot and killed before the situation's been assessed. And that, of course, happened just recently. And people are kind of wondering, how could that possibly happen? Aren't there things in place? So, Chief, if you could just walk me through what happens when somebody makes a 911 call, and let's go from there forward.
A 911 call comes in generally, if it's from a house, that's a landline. And what you'll get on the screen of 911, you're going to get that phone number, and you're going to go ahead and get the location of that phone number.
Right.
And it'll also tell you who the emergency responders are. And what had happened when 911 first started, it was almost kind of like swatting, because people would move and they would carry that phone number with them.
Right.
But the database couldn't keep up with the movements, so we would get calls sometimes that would be the old address.
Right.
They were actually calling for maybe a neighboring town or something.
So that they took the number with them, they called 911, 911 responded. Got it. To their new place, to their old place.
Yeah, swatting puts you into that same position as sending you to the wrong location.
Right. So the idea, there's this aspect of it, which is the system itself not keeping the addresses current, but then there's also the issue of people making false 911 calls. Now, I know we cite some research and some statistics in the books. How common is it for a 911 call to be either accidentally or intentionally false?
I'm sorry, how many?
How common, just in general? Give me a ballpark. And you ran a police department. You work for police agencies. How many of them are real things, and how many of them are non-emergency or fake?
I would say probably less than 1% are really false phone calls. You don't get that many.
Right, but I'm talking about ones that are actually not, because we've seen the loads now. We've got numbers in some jurisdictions high as 33% of the calls being non-emergency calls or not, or even.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's yeah. So when you are getting a call from 911 and emergency responders are requested, you're not actually thinking all the time that this is going to be an actual emergency that requires a response. You're not always thinking about that. You're thinking there's a possibility here that something's going on. There's the possibility that nothing's going on. Correct? Is that has to be part of your thinking, right?
Oh, sure. You try to believe the information that the caller is giving, right. Obviously.
Right.
And you take that as being fact.
But if you learn basically that may or may not be the case, right, over time.
Correct.
So what are the protocols in place to prevent someone from falsely calling 911 and claiming there's a crime when there isn't one and putting lives at risk so SWAT isn't initiated? What are the protocols in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening? What things should be going on to prevent it?
The thing with the swatting stuff is when you're getting the call, you're thinking it's real. The
right.
dispatcher that's receiving the call.
Right.
The operator. So they've got the problem of trying to figure out. They're just accepting everything to be true and be fact when people call.
Right.
And that's just what we do with all the businesses. You have to respond in that manner, because if you go and respond and think, "Oh, that's not true," you're going to have another poor output probably.
Right. Right.
But you've got to take it and accept what the people are telling you and respond in that manner.
Sure.
And swatting, I think, as it's come along, it's the training. I know that is one of the issues that they brought up over that Kansas incident.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to be done. I mean, if we want to talk about the Kansas issue, you want to talk about that, for example? Not
just yet. I want to, in your mind, I want to talk in general. I don't want to put you on the hot seat yet.
Oh, okay.
I would love for you to get on the hot seat, but I want to first just talk in general. If you're a police officer responding to a 911 call, what things are in place and what protocols would you expect to be in place to prevent you from, say, shooting an unarmed person prematurely at a response at a call?
Back to training the officer himself once you approach.
Right.
It's not so much the 911.
That's a really great point. So it is not the 911 call that should be dictating the officer's actions on the scene. It only dictates what they prepare for, right? That's what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, right. And so that's where the training for the officer when he responds here, how he's going to handle it.
That's a really great way of putting it. So the onus, the responsibility should not be put on 911 to be the correct and accurate information provider. They're just relaying what the caller's telling you. It's the trained professional in this situation is the law enforcement officer who's responding and is required to then, once they get there, to make a live scene assessment, right?
Correct. See, what the training the officers received is the final decision maker on it, taking into account the information they're receiving from the dispatcher.
Right.
But on the same side, dispatchers
right.
need to be trained too to make sure they're asking the right questions
and giving the
right information.
Right. And I would have to say this from the point of view of the 911 operator, they really can't go wrong in assuming that the information is correct, because they've got to dispatch for the worst case possible, right? To save lives. That's their objective.
Correct. But there's things that could be done.
Yeah.
That depending on the system that the police department has or the 911 center has, as far as past calls to a residence.
Right. Now, you and I both know that a residence has many residents. Well, all 911 logs the history of all calls to a residence. So when you get a call there, you know whether or not there's been nuisance calls or fake calls there in the past, right? That's you're going to know. Or if there's been legitimate calls there in the past. So you know what the officer's going into. That's the responsibility of 911 to pass that information along, right?
Correct. And as long as you've got the right proper database that you can
Yeah.
do that, the CAD system that can let you do that, then you should be utilizing your information.
Right. You shouldn't be sending officers blind to any location. I would the training that I've always given and the training that I've always received when it comes to these issues of responding officers is that before you even respond to a scene, to any location, you know what typically has been going on at that location. Give me the history of calls to that location. Give me some kind of knowledge or information about what's going on there and the actors that are there, whether or not they've been armed, whether or not there's been problems, so that they know what they're getting into, right? That's just reasonable. The history, the background of the location, as per 911 per the database. That's what you're trying to say?
Well, yeah, there's some information that should be provided. The dispatcher should let them know what types of calls and that, and it's been there. And in some situations, you've got information in your system probably tells you who lives there. You've got a phone number for that resident.
Right.
You've got contact phone numbers for the people.
Right.
So there's some information that could be gathered before the officers ever even get there, depending on the situation.
Right. And well, let me just think. Getting that information, the responsibility of 911 is to have the right system, have their people trained to respond and dispatch the right people, to be in communication with law enforcement, these kinds of situations. And then it's the responsibility of law enforcement to be trained to take that information to make evaluations on the scene as to how to proceed and respond. That's where we're at, correct?
Right, but I mean, the dispatchers obviously can help by gathering some more background information depending on the type of call it is.
Right, exactly. They
a lot of
can.
times you may get people that hang up on you.
Right.
There's different things that can happen.
Right. Well, they'll have no information because, yeah, exactly. If they're just looking for somebody.
Yeah.
Now,
sometimes you've got the information available there where they can make callbacks to a residence or
Right.
something and get further information too.
Right. Now, one of the things that I'm really curious about is this. When you have a situation like this where someone has called in I don't want to say hostage situation, but a situation that it fits the parameters of requiring an immediate response, lives in danger, guns at the scene. To me, that requires a level of verification before you start to apply lethal force to it, right? I mean, that's because here's the thing we both know. We both know that we just talked about addresses are wrong, locations are wrong. Even when you have warrants and you've done the research to do the warrants, you can have officers going and serving the warrant on the wrong house and people getting hurt. And that's because somebody didn't do their job where they're doing the pre-surveillance of going and checking it out. So talk to me about, in a case like this, well, it's similar to Wichita, just in general, not Wichita in specific, but similar to that in general. What kinds of things should law enforcement be doing as they're responding? What would you expect them to do as they're heading to the scene? They say, oh, we've got hostages, we've got lives in danger. What are the things you think that the protocols that should be in place to make sure that the lives are going to be protected, and shooting isn't the first option? What do you is it the opposite? Do we immediately think, well, we got lives in danger, so the first thing we're going to do is start shooting when we get there? Tell me what in your experience, what protocols are in place and what's being followed on the way to the scene?
Well, obviously, the first thing is you want the safety of your officers and you want the safety of your residents.
Right.
Depending on what kind of situation you're in. Most commonly, you want to set up perimeters.
Right. So the first thing you do is decide where your perimeters are going to be and where you're going to be.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The first thing you're going to do then is you're going to decide where your perimeters are going to be and where you're going to be within those perimeters.
Sure. And then, that's what I'm saying about having the information available and being able to make contact, maybe through telephones,
right,
before you approach a house even.
Right. So before you even go there, you should be trying to initiate contact. And this is to verify that, one, people are home, and that, two, what's going on is what's been said has been going on. And then, three, to make sure you've got the right house, right, or the right location.
Right. And that's where it comes in handy if you get into that information before your arrival or before you at least approach the house.
So so far on the way, we're talking about deciding where your perimeter is going to be, where you're going to put your people within that perimeter, and then are you thinking about contacting the people inside the residence to make sure you've got the right residents, to know who you're talking about, who's there, and to verify the incident in general. All those things should be being done. That's a basic investigative or a basic response protocol. Is that what you're thinking? No? Maybe? What do you think? That's the way we respond? Did you hear my question or no?
You were breaking up through a lot of that, but
Oh, sorry.
I think, basically those are the concerns you're going to have as you're approaching. And, with a hostage situation, that's where the perimeters are going to be set up, and you hopefully get somebody in there to negotiate with the person.
Right.
And hopefully by telephone's the best you can,
Right. Well, let's talk specifically about what was going on in Wichita, just because it's so interesting. And in Wichita, we have what we have is a man on a porch, and the man on the porch is by himself. He's looks like he's on the actual porch going into the door, and he's by himself, and he turns and they shoot him. Now, my first thought is, my first thought is, they haven't confirmed who this guy is or what he's doing, whether or not what he belongs to, what's his relationship to the scene, anything. And then the second thought is, if you shoot this guy on the porch, you're shooting with a high-power rifle. If that round goes through him, what are you going through him into? Who else is in there? The door appears to be open. So I guess now I'm putting you on the hot seat. Tell me what you're thinking when you see that. Your response to just looking at the video.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So when he got shot by an officer from across the street with a rifle.
That's right, an AR type rifle.
Wasn't on the front porch with him.
He was not.
You hate to second guess it, the guy or anything on all this stuff. An officer, you're out there and you don't know what's going on through his head and what all he's observing there. But, with the distance between them, it seemed like he had a little more time to react than when he hasn't seen a weapon or anything.
He hasn't seen a weapon. He's got a vehicle a barrier, a safety barrier. He's all geared up. They're all geared up on that side of the street. We weren't there, but other than what's on the 911 call, there is no imminent threat to this officer. He's got time on his side, like you said.
I guess if they're in a position where they're safe, and they know they're safe, it gives you more time to react.
Right.
When I first heard the story, I kind of thought the guy actually walked up to the door and knocked on the door, and the guy came to the door and reached into it, and that's why he fired so quickly.
Well, that would make sense, because that creates an exigent circumstance, right? That would make sense.
Yeah, but, the distance between him, and if he's already taken a safety position,
right.
I think there's a little bit of problem there.
And the other thing is, you wanted to talk a little bit about the mechanism by which the call came in. Tell me what you were thinking when I cut you off earlier because I wanted to save it.
Oh, okay, yeah. The thing, the way, I don't know why the call actually went, from what I understand, to a security officer at City Hall who got the phone number. He called 911 and gave them the phone number. 911 calls that phone number.
Right.
So that takes away the information they normally would have had to confirm and verify the address and the phone number coming from that residence. And that's one of the parts of the problem. And that's where, when I talk about gathering further information,
yes,
when that dispatcher says on there that, we had a call there, I think it was in August,
right.
They should have been digging that information out, found out, who the people are, what the call was about.
Right.
If there was a landline there that they could have called back.
Right. And do you think...
That's where I was going at with that.
I totally agree. Now, 2020 hindsight, let me ask you this. Do you think that this indicates... This is part of the way that the caller scrubbed his call to make it look like... To keep them from guessing whether or not whether or not he was at the residence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he did...
It looked to me, I know that he said it was a one-story house.
Yeah, hold on. Let me go back and
Just
look.
telling the video for sure if that was a 2-story or not.
It's 2 stories. The house that they shot the guy
What
in.
I thought.
There's a there's
And
a
those little bits of information you should be aware of and taking into account.
Yep.
That, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
Especially with the way swatting's starting to come around, and has been.
Right. And this is just so people don't understand, this is a common tactic of not only gamers doing it to each other, it's obviously very immature and very dangerous, but also it's common when people find out where celebrities live or people that they don't like lived, and they will swat them. We had an interesting case that we put in the textbook, Rich. You'll find this interesting. It was a 911 dispatcher, and her boyfriend was at a hotel with somebody else, and she sent SWAT to them, I think at least 4 times in one night to that hotel. And they responded each time with guns, knocking down doors. SWAT went there and she got arrested for it. I mean, she went down. But the point is, she knew exactly the words to use that would subvert any security check of what she was saying that would get them to roll immediately. So, and she did it to the same hotel room multiple times in one night, and they kept sending people. That was the thing that was amazing to me. So this is not some new idea. It's a new technology on an old motive, right? I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you think we ought to add that people need to know about the 911 system or the way it works, or that we could do better to prevent these kinds of incidents from happening in the future, from your perspective? Because, I mean, the protocols you outlined that you've suggested are so basic that it's very clear that if they had been done, that there would be knowledge about the lack of any actual danger at the crime scene. There wasn't that the event wasn't actually true, since they didn't do their due diligence. That's what it comes down to. These protocols are so basic. Is there something else that people need to know or understand, or that if you were giving law enforcement training on this issue, what would you tell your own officers if you had one of these in your own jurisdiction back in the day?
Well, on this swatting stuff, I think the number one training has to be with the dispatchers, so that when they're gathering information, if they start hearing things, wait, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, and then the officers, once they compare that information with the dispatcher, and they start seeing little red flags pop up, like, wait a minute.
Right.
For example, saying 1-story house is 2-story.
Right.
The dispatcher, I think, on that call, she was going into a good direction when she started asking about the weapon, and the gun, and things like that. She did, I think, she did pretty good questioning in there. But just to make sense that if he's holding a gun on the mom and on the kid, or he's keeping them in a closet, why would he come to the front door?
Right. right. But that comes down to the thing. What you're asking for, and I think this is reasonable, is that there be judgment before force is deployed. Before lethal force is deployed, there must be judgment. Is that not essentially what you're saying? There has to be reflection and judgment. You can't just respond believing that everything you've been told is absolutely true. You have to use your eyes to see if what you're seeing is really what's been reported. Is that fair or no?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is you've got to start weighing what information you've got.
Right.
And if red flags come up that's not matching what they're telling the dispatcher once you get to the scene, those should be red flags to say, hey, let's kind of hold off here a little bit, or whatever you need to do.
But the other thing you said, it makes way more sense as well, and that is what they did. They set up a perimeter. They were a distance away to keep themselves safe, but then they acted in a way that would suggest acting as though they were in a war zone. They acted in a way like, they were in a firefight already. Instead of setting up their perimeter, making contact, talking, observing, and deciding, they were immediately... They get there, they see the person, boom, first move, they drop him. Instead of the reflective part, the deliberation part, the act. And I know people are going to say, the officer's life was in danger. Well, actually, the officer put themselves in that situation right there without doing all the protocols they need to engage in that would have kept them safe along the way. To my mind, that's how I'm seeing it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Am I off base there or no? Because if you don't have the right, if you put yourself in a situation without the right information, you're definitely in danger.
Yeah, if they were in a safe position, then they obviously had a little more time to react and evaluate what they really had there.
That's right.
Before reacting like they did, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be interesting, and it's all going to come out in a lawsuit. I imagine, my hope is that they will, we'll see. Maybe, we'll see if we have all the facts and information that's been released. But from the video, it looks bad. From the protocols that they didn't engage, it looks bad. And maybe there's more information, maybe not. But right now, from our perspective, it really comes down to, do you use force as the first option, or do you use force as the last option? And all I can think is, if you got people inside the house and you're shooting towards the house, you better have a really good reason for doing that. Because even if you think you have a clear shot, you don't know what's on the other side of him or that door. And to me, that's just, I don't know. I feel like there's a I would love to know the history of this guy's training and why he pulled that trigger, why he thought that was a good idea. If he was known for this or not. So, is that fair, or am I being unfair? I need you to tell me I'm being unfair, because sometimes I feel like I'm like you say, we're Monday morning quarterbacking a little bit, but that's in essence that's the job. Unfortunately, you
like the quarterback.
I don't. Here's the thing. The thing is, I believe this. I believe that we do all the documentation, we do all the. We record things, we document things, we take notes, we write reports, precisely so, in such a way that other people can make evaluations of our work. That's the point, right? Otherwise, why write anything down? Why bother? Just take my word for it. But the whole thing is, it's all science, all law enforcement, all police work, investigative work, all court work is done with the idea that somebody's going to evaluate the nature and quality of that work, whether it's a supervisor at a later point who wasn't there, who's red penning your reports, or it's a forensic expert in a court proceeding, or whether or not it's a politician who's got a political agenda. We make reports and make documentation in such a way as to provide specifically for the ability of other people to Monday morning quarterback. That's the whole point. Otherwise, why write anything?
Need it though. Nobody ever improves. You don't evaluate.
That's exactly right. I'm going to leave it right there. I think that's the vein we want to go in here. We want to get better. We want to learn. So hopefully, we can, as this case moves forward, we will learn from it, and we'll gain some valuable lessons, because I'm certain this is not going to be the last time someone's going to get swatted, even in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah. Sorrowfully, but true.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Rich. Well, thank you very much for your time. Stay with me after I hang up, but I want to just thank everybody else for listening. And if you have any questions for me or Rich, I will tag him and me in this video so that people can ask. All right? Thank you very much.
Okay.